In the quiet, dust-filled landscapes of the Middle East, a clock is ticking. For years, the world watched one countdown: Iran's race towards a nuclear weapon. Diplomats shuttled between capitals, sanctions were levied, and the rhetoric of war ebbed and flowed with every spin of a centrifuge. Then, in June of 2025, the nature of the conversation violently changed. American and Israeli bombers, in a decisive military operation, tore into Iran's nuclear ambitions. Key facilities at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan were damaged, setting the program back by months, maybe even years, according to Pentagon assessments. But the strike that was meant to end the threat may have only unveiled a more immediate one. In the aftermath, with its nuclear path seriously damaged and its economy crippled, Iran has been forced to reveal its true final red line. It's not a secret uranium facility buried under a mountain. It's not a political concession. It's the one pillar of its national security that Tehran has declared, unequivocally and repeatedly, to be absolutely non-negotiable. This is the story of Iran's missile program, the weapon it believes guarantees its survival, the weapon the West sees as an intolerable threat, and the catastrophic consequences for the world if this final red line is ever crossed. While the world was focused on Iran's nuclear ambitions, the real red line, the one that could actually trigger a war, wasn't a bomb. It's a missile. Even as tense, active talks about the future of a damaged nuclear program continue into 2026, Iran holds a non-negotiable weapon in its other hand. After the strikes of 2025, the strategic calculus of the Middle East has been fundamentally altered. A delayed nuclear threat has been overshadowed by the very real, very tangible threat of thousands of missiles aimed at the heart of the region and the global economy. This is the story of why that weapon exists, how it became the guarantor of a revolution, and the frightening new reality of a world where diplomacy is on life support. And this final red line is all that stands between a fragile peace and a regional inferno. To understand why a nation of around 89 million people would stake its future on a missile arsenal, you have to go back to a scar etched deep into the Iranian psyche. You have to go back to the 1980s, to a brutal, grinding, 8-year conflict that defines Iran's strategic thinking to this day: the Iran-Iraq War. When Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980, he figured it would be a swift victory. The Iranian Revolution was still in its chaotic infancy, its military purged and disorganized. But the invasion sparked a ferocious nationalistic resistance. The war devolved into a nightmarish slog, a conflict of human wave attacks, trench warfare, and unimaginable brutality. For Iran, one of the most traumatizing parts of this war was its sheer defenselessness against attacks from the sky. This period became known as the War of the Cities. Starting in 1984, Iraqi forces began a systematic campaign of terror, launching hundreds of Soviet-made Scud missiles at Iranian population centers. Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, city after city was pummeled. For the residents, there was no warning, no air raid sirens that could offer a chance to flee. A long-range missile travels faster than sound. The first sign of an attack was the explosion itself, the sudden, violent obliteration of a city block, a marketplace, or an apartment building. Iran had no answer. It had virtually no long-range weapons to hit back with. While Iraq could strike deep into Iran with impunity, Iran could do little but absorb the blows. This sense of national humiliation and vulnerability became a foundational trauma for the Islamic Republic. The regime's leaders, many of whom were commanders on the front lines, swore an oath: never again. Never again would Iran be left so exposed. Never again would its enemies be able to hold its cities hostage without fear of devastating retribution. That experience isn't just history, it's baked into the core of Iran's strategic DNA. While the world, particularly the United States and Israel, sees Iran's missile arsenal as an offensive tool for aggression, Tehran sees it through a purely defensive lens. It's the sword forged in the fire of the War of the Cities, the ultimate guarantor that the regime can protect itself from foreign powers with vastly superior armies and air forces. In the decades that followed, Iran, isolated and under crippling sanctions, embarked on a relentless, homegrown program to build that deterrent. It couldn't buy advanced fighter jets. It couldn't build an aircraft carrier. But it could build missiles. With some help from partners like North Korea, Iran began to reverse engineer and then innovate, slowly but surely, creating a tiered arsenal designed to counter every conceivable threat. This history is the key to understanding the profound disconnect at the heart of the current crisis. When American and Israeli diplomats demand that Iran negotiate away its ballistic missiles, they're not just asking for a security concession. In the minds of Iran's leadership, they are asking Tehran to voluntarily return to the helplessness of the 1980s. They are asking a nation to surrender the very weapon it believes prevents its own destruction. And for Iran, that isn't a point of negotiation. It's a declaration of existential war. The missile program isn't just a military asset. It's a promise the regime made to itself, a promise written in the rubble of its cities. What began as a desperate attempt to counter Iraqi Scuds has, over 4 decades, evolved into the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. This isn't a force built for a conventional battlefield showdown, but for a doctrine of asymmetric warfare. Iran knows it can't compete with the US in a head-to-head conflict. Its air force is antiquated, its navy a fraction of the size of the American fleets in the Persian Gulf. The missiles are the great equalizer. They're designed to overwhelm, to inflict unacceptable costs, and to hold every single one of its adversaries' assets at risk. Think of the arsenal in tiers, each designed for a specific strategic purpose. The first tier is the foundation, short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs. These are the workhorses of Iran's regional power projection. This category includes missiles like the Fateh 110 family, with ranges of 300 to 700 kilometers. These solid-fueled, road-mobile missiles are designed for rapid deployment. Their job is to give Iran the ability to strike tactical targets across the region, threatening U.S. military bases in Iraq, Kuwait, and parts of Syria, as well as key infrastructure in neighboring Gulf Arab states. Their mobility makes them a nightmare for intelligence to track. Hidden in hardened tunnels, dispersed across the vast Iranian landscape, they can be launched with little warning, making a preemptive strike incredibly difficult. The second tier provides strategic depth. Medium-range ballistic missiles, MRBMs. This is the heart of Iran's deterrent. Missiles like the Shahab-3 and more advanced successors like the Ghadar-1 can reach up to 2,000 kilometers. On a map, that range covers all of Israel, all of Saudi Arabia, and American bases as far away as Qatar and the UAE. These are the weapons designed to fulfill the promise of the 1980s. If Iran is attacked, this is the arsenal that allows Tehran to hit back directly against its adversaries, ensuring any aggression comes at a staggering price. Then there's the emerging third tier, the next generation of Iranian missile tech. This includes solid-fueled missiles like the Sejil, which has a similar 2,000-kilometer range but can be launched far more quickly. More recently, Iran has heavily promoted its so-called hypersonic missiles, like the Fatah, claiming they can travel at extreme speeds and maneuver, making them nearly impossible to intercept. While Western intelligence is skeptical of these specific claims, the direction of Iran's research is clear. Develop weapons that can defeat the sophisticated missile defense systems built by the US and Israel. Beyond just range, the sheer size of this arsenal is a key part of its strategy. Iran is believed to have several thousand missiles. In a conflict, the plan wouldn't be to launch one or two, but to fire massive salvos from all over the country, a strategy of saturation. The goal is to overwhelm defenses like Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow, or the American THAAD systems. Even if those systems are 95% effective, a volley of 100 missiles means 5 still get through. When those 5 are carrying half-ton warheads, the damage can be catastrophic. This entire arsenal is controlled by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, Aerospace Force, a parallel military whose sole purpose is to safeguard the revolution. They've invested billions in hiding this force in a vast network of underground missile cities, sprawling tunnel complexes dug deep into mountainsides, safe from prying eyes and preemptive strikes. This is why, following the US and Israeli strikes on its nuclear program in June 2025, Iran's strategic posture didn't collapse. It shifted. The nuclear program was a future deterrent. The missiles are the deterrent of today. They are tangible, they are deployed, and they represent Iran's credible ability to inflict immense pain on its enemies. It's an arsenal built on a memory of helplessness, forged in isolation, and it now stands as the most dangerous and non-negotiable element in the unstable Middle East. In the wake of the June 2025 strikes that damaged Iran's nuclear infrastructure, the world of diplomacy was shaken, but not shattered. The very subject of years of painstaking negotiations, uranium enrichment levels, centrifuges, breakout times, had been attacked by military force. Yet, the diplomatic track didn't vanish. Instead, it's become more tense and more urgent than ever. On the surface, there are still signals of engagement. Indirect talks between American and Iranian officials, often mediated by Oman, have been active and progressing into 2026. We hear phrases from Iranian officials about seeking a fair deal, and from American officials about a diplomatic solution. But beneath this veneer lies a chasm of mistrust. The United States, having demonstrated its willingness to use force, maintains a maximalist stance. The demand is not just for a verifiable end to any nuclear weapons ambitions, but an insistence on zero enrichment on Iranian soil. On top of that, the U.S. continues to push for any deal to include severe restrictions on the very ballistic missile program Iran considers non-negotiable. From Washington's perspective, the 2025 strikes were a tool to force Iran into accepting terms it had previously rejected. For Iran, the strikes were a profound betrayal that validated the hardest of hardline worldviews. For years, moderates argued that engagement could provide security. The strikes shattered that argument. Hardliners in Tehran now argue that diplomacy is a trap and that true security comes only from military strength. Why, they ask, should Iran trust any new agreement with a power that attacked the subject of the last one? This has created a deep trust deficit. In response to the attacks, and through new legislation, Iran curtailed some cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, pausing some inspections for safety assessments at the damaged sites. While U.S. intelligence says Iran has paused enrichment since the strikes, the world is losing visibility. We see satellite photos showing reconstruction activity at sites like Natanz. But what it means is a matter of speculation. So we're left with a diplomatic standoff. The US demands Iran negotiate away its missile shield as a precondition for peace, while Iran sees that shield as its only defense. Still, the talks aren't dead. Iran has reportedly floated offers to reduce its uranium enrichment back to near JCPOA levels and pause for up to 7 years, but only in exchange for lifting sanctions and recognizing a right to enrich that the US insists it can never have. It's a conversation where both sides are still at the table, but remain worlds apart on the core issues. With the nuclear program damaged and the economy crushed, Iran's leverage has been reduced to one powerful card: its missile arsenal. And by making that arsenal non-negotiable, it has drawn a final red line in the sand. This level of strategic analysis, understanding the history, the hardware, and the human element behind these global conflicts, is what we strive to do in every video. The headlines only tell you what is happening, but we want to show you why. If you find this kind of in-depth explanation valuable and want to support our work, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It's the single best way to make sure you don't miss our future investigations into the forces shaping our world. Your support allows us to spend the time needed to go beyond the noise and connect the dots on these critical issues. What happens if diplomacy fails completely? What happens if that red line is crossed? The scenario that keeps military planners in the Pentagon and across the Middle East awake at night is a concerted US or Israeli strike aimed at neutralizing Iran's missile program. But unlike the concentrated locations of Iran's nuclear facilities, targeting its missile arsenal is an exponentially more complex and dangerous proposition. It wouldn't be a single event, but the opening salvo of a war that could engulf the entire region and shatter the global economy. First, the attack itself would be a monumental undertaking. Iran's missile forces aren't just sitting there. They are designed for survival through dispersion, mobility, and concealment. Hundreds of mobile launchers are constantly moving between hidden positions across Iran's vast and mountainous terrain, a country more than 3 times the size of France. Its most critical assets are housed in those heavily fortified, subterranean missile cities, buried so deep they might be immune to all but the most powerful bunker-busting bombs. A campaign to degrade this threat would require a sustained air campaign lasting days, if not weeks, striking thousands of targets simultaneously. And even then, success wouldn't be guaranteed. US intelligence would have to assume that, despite their best efforts, a significant portion of Iran's arsenal, perhaps dozens or even hundreds of missiles, would survive the initial onslaught. And then would come the retaliation. This is the second and most terrifying part. Iran's response would be swift, furious, and on multiple fronts. It wouldn't be a symmetrical fight, but a campaign of asymmetric warfare designed to inflict maximum pain and chaos. The first consequence would be the targeting of every US military installation in the region. The 30,000 to 40,000 American troops stationed at bases in Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, and elsewhere would be in the direct line of fire. Iran could launch coordinated salvos of ballistic missiles at these facilities, aiming to cripple US air power and demonstrate that America's presence in the region is untenable. Simultaneously, Iran would turn its sights on America's regional allies. The gleaming skylines of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the sprawling oil terminals of Saudi Arabia, all are within easy range. Strikes on this critical economic infrastructure would be designed to punish the Gulf states for hosting American forces. The next front would be the global economy via the world's most critical energy choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway, only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, is the artery through which roughly 20% of the world's total oil consumption flows every day. Iran could attempt to close it with a swarm of fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, drones, and naval mines. Even a temporary closure would send oil prices skyrocketing, potentially triggering a global recession. While the U.S. Navy would eventually be able to fight its way through, the economic damage would already be done. Finally, Iran would activate its axis of resistance, its network of proxy forces. This is a key pillar of its strategy, allowing it to turn a conflict with Iran into a region-wide war. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, with its arsenal estimated to be over 150,000 rockets and missiles, could unleash a devastating barrage against Israel. In Yemen, the Houthis could launch their own attacks on shipping in the Red Sea and at targets in Saudi Arabia. In Iraq and Syria, Iranian-backed militias would immediately begin attacking U.S. forces stationed there. The result would be a multi-front nightmare. A war that starts with an airstrike on a missile silo in Iran could, within 24 hours, lead to burning oil fields in Saudi Arabia, rockets raining down on Tel Aviv, and U.S. warships dodging mines in the Strait of Hormuz. This is the catastrophic scenario that Iran has spent 40 years preparing for. It's a strategy of mutually assured destruction, not with nukes, but with a torrent of conventional firepower designed to make the cost of attacking Iran simply too high. We stand on a razor's edge. The military actions of June 2025, intended to remove the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran, have paradoxically simplified and amplified the danger. By damaging Iran's nuclear program, the strikes intensified Tehran's reliance on the one credible deterrent it has left, its conventional missile arsenal. This has removed some of the ambiguity from the strategic equation. The slow, opaque timeline of nuclear development has been replaced by the immediate, kinetic threat of thousands of deployed missiles. The situation is now a perfect, terrifying paradox. Iran's missile program is both the guarantor of a fragile, tense peace and the most likely trigger for a catastrophic war. For Tehran, it is the defensive shield born from the trauma of the War of the Cities, the only thing preventing what it sees as a concerted effort at regime change. To negotiate it away would be suicide. For Washington, Jerusalem, and Riyadh, that same arsenal is an offensive sword that enables a network of disruptive proxies and holds the global economy hostage. To allow it to exist unchallenged is seen as an unacceptable risk. Tense and high-stakes diplomacy continues, but it's overshadowed by the logic of military force. The United States has demonstrated its willingness to strike, and Iran has made it clear that any strike on its missiles will be met with an all-out regional response. We are left in a state of unstable equilibrium, where both sides are deterred not by trust or treaties, but by the sheer scale of the destruction the other can unleash. This is a peace maintained by fear, a standoff where any miscalculation, any political shift, any stray spark could ignite a conflict that would reshape the Middle East for generations. This forces us to confront a final, unsettling question. Is Iran's missile program a defensive shield or an offensive sword? After the events of the past year, the answer may no longer matter. The line has been drawn, the stakes are clear, and the world is now barreling towards finding out.